Welcome to the Diversity Report podcasts, where we interview diverse innovators and wonderful change makers. I'm Deborah Levine, your host, editor-in-chief of the American Diversity Report. And with me today is Toni Crowe. Toni Crowe graduated from the University of Illinois with an engineering degree. She obtained her master's in management, became a professional engineer, certified professional manager, and a corporate vice president. She evolved into an entrepreneur and is CEO of Just One, with the goal of stopping just one person from making her mistakes. In June 2018, Toni started successfully pursuing her dream of becoming a full-time author. Welcome, Toni.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm very curious to hear about your journey, and I know our audience will be too. So tell us how you began as an engineer. What inspired you to go in that direction?
Well, I had went to a technical boys high school called Bloom Technical School. And in that school was one of the first girls that were allowed to attend the school. And unlike a traditional high school where you had home economics, we had wood shop and car shop and electric shop. So I had the opportunity while going to high school to see all the different things associated with it. One of the things that the school always did was bring in working professionals to say what it was you could do with the skills that you had learned. For example, they brought in welders for people that were not looking toward going to college, but were going to go and start working. One of the things they brought in was an electrical engineer, and I found that fascinating. So even though when I got out of high school, I had some misadventures, when time came for me to go back to college, I remembered that and decided that I'd like to give that a try. I went back to school to be a mechanical engineer, not an electrical engineer, but they were offering scholarships for electrical engineering. So I changed to an electrical engineer instead of mechanical engineer. It was the Corning Glassworks company that offered something called the Corbett Scholar.
I see. So you were on scholarship getting your electrical engineering degree. Yes?
Yes, and that's a pretty, one of those stories about tenacity, because when I went back to school, I was an older student. I was already married with 2 children. By the time I finally got around to returning to college, I was about 21 years old, going on 22. And I didn't know about all the things you should have known about. I was essentially clueless. I was the first person in my family to make it through high school. And then when I graduated college, and so on and so forth. So when I went off to college, my mom could only just wave to me because there were 5 other children. When I got to college, one of my classmates told me that there was a company, Corning Glassworks, that was offering something called Corbett Scholars. And the Corbett Scholars, they paid your tuition, they bought your books, they offered you a job in the summer to work where they paid you like a real engineer. And then they also had a super celebration where they provided a $20,000 a year stipend. And I had never heard of anything like that. But I was too late to sign up, so I couldn't sign up for it. When the gentleman came to campus, what I ended up doing was going to the office where he was and sitting on the floor and telling him if anybody didn't show up, I would take their place. And they said, sure, if you want to sit here. Unfortunately, everyone did show up. When he broke for lunch, I broke for lunch. When he came back, at the end of the day, I had been in the office sitting in the corner all day long. And when he came out and saw me there, he said, you've been here all day. And he actually brought me in and gave me an interview because I had just refused to leave, hoping that someone, would miss their interview. And when I participated in the interview, he said, what kind of engineer do you want to be? I told him I want to be a mechanical engineer. He says, well, I don't have any more mechanical engineering slots left. And then he looked at me and said, but you've been here all day. I do have electrical engineering slots. So let me ask you again, what kind of engineer do you want to be? I told him, I absolutely want to be an electrical engineer. I filled out the application right there, and he took it back, and I found out I got accepted. But that was just too good to be true. I had never heard of such a thing. So I just missed class that day and sat there until they let me in.
I love it. I love it. And I guess that's how you became an employee with the company too?
Well, when I graduated, I actually did not go with Corning Glass. And the reason was simple. I was seduced by McDonnell Douglas Aerospace Corporation. I was very, very lucky because the University of Illinois believed in making their engineers well-rounded. So all of us had to take a course in all the different types of engineering, which the aerospace companies loved since they had so many different disciplines rolled in. So although my concentration was electrical engineering, I had courses in water flow, courses in mechanical engineering, courses in aerospace engineering. And back then, aerospace engineering was one of those things, it was hard to get people that knew anything about it. So what McDonnell Douglas was doing is when they found someone they liked, they simply just kept working on you until you came to work for them. So I went to work for McDonnell Douglas. However, I did marry the supervisor of the first plant that I met in Corning. So Corning did provide me with something. That's where I got my second husband from.
I see. And what was your career like in aerospace engineering?
I consider myself incredibly lucky because most of the time I ended up with people who wanted to help me. When you come in as a new engineer, you don't really understand how to build rockets or wire harnesses or basically anything. And they ended up assigning me to one of the older engineers that they were having trouble getting his knowledge from. And the way they actually did that was to put me with him. He had run off about 4 engineers, young engineers. And because I was older, I didn't recognize that he didn't want me working for him. One of the things he did to me one time, and I smile about it now, but it wasn't funny then, was I turned in a report based on some experiments that he had me run. And I had designed the experiment and run it through all the different things I understood about engineering. And I came in and he had marked through every single line on the report and told me to rewrite it. I rewrote it for him. He marked through every line again and I rewrote it. Now, by that time, I guess the other engineers all went to their bosses and said, hey, you know what? I don't want to work for this dude. That's not what I did. What I did, being me, is I rewrote it again. And when I rewrote it that third time, he took me out to lunch and told me that was the level of work he expected every time that he gave me something to do. He didn't want my first effort or my second effort. He wanted to make sure that I had done the very best I could on everything that he gave me to do. I believe that lesson is one of the reasons why I ended up doing so well in corporate America, because anything that I turned in, I had really worked on it. I had really looked it over and tried to make sure it was the very best I could make it, even if it was a report about dust. Didn't matter. I took the time to make it really great. And I think my bosses like that. So so having him with his grouchy self, he was 79 years old. And while I was working for him, he got married again. He was like 82. So, he was living life and he was the smartest engineer I ever met. And he didn't have a college degree. That taught me a lot of things.
And you became a vice president of the corporation?
I became a vice president of 2 of the most powerful corporations, United Technologies and a company called Ultra Electronics. Ultra is an English-owned aerospace company, and United Technologies is an American both are multi-billion-dollar corporations. It turns out that I love making things. I love having things built and seeing things come to a culmination and watching things work. And that I have a talent for getting teams of very different types of people to work together well. And that made a big difference in my career. One of my bosses hired me and asked me to come in. He was going on vacation. He asked me to come in on a Friday before he left on vacation. And when he left, he says, I recognize that you're not going to be able to do everything. All I need you to do is to keep things going while I'm gone. He was gone for 3 weeks. When he came back, I had made a set of improvements. I had changed things around, and things were flowing much better and faster than when he left it. And what he told me was he never expected that I would be able to get everyone to work together so quickly. And he asked me what I had done. I told him I did something very simple. I had a meeting, and I asked everybody to tell me what they would change if they could in front of everyone else. And that sparked a whole set of discussions that they had never had before, because they weren't talking to each other about what they didn't like. They were talking to me about what they didn't like. But of course, since everyone was in the room, they started talking to each other. And that's how we made those improvements.
So you have written books, a series of 7, to try and explain and instruct people so they can do or follow the path that you have. Is that correct?
Yes. And when you talk about my book on corporate America, which is Bullets and Bosses Don't Have Friends, How to Survive in a Tough Workplace, it's a series of the stories of my life and how I handled those different incidents that happened to me while I was in corporate America. Because as a person who grew up in the projects of Chicago, I didn't know any supervisors or managers. I always tell them, one of the first things I say in the book is you need to recognize what has happened to you. And what has happened to you is what happened to me. I was technically excellent. That meant that I was a great engineer, and their reward for me being a great engineer was to take me out of engineering and put me in management where I didn't know anything. So you get promoted up the engineering chain, and if you are doing really well, they take you out of your discipline and they have you start leading teams. And that's a whole different set of skills that can be learned, but it is a different set of skills. What it takes for me to design a missile radar altimeter is different than what it takes to manage a group of 25 people. There's different skill sets. And back then, we weren't getting any training. They simply said, you're great at what you're doing, you're now managing this team. So there's a lot of things I had to learn the hard way that should be common knowledge for people that are trying to become a supervisor or move forward. And I explained each incident, the level at which I was when I addressed that incident, and then what I did about it. And then at the end of the chapter, I put an exercise where I say, kind of, what would you do about it? And discuss this with others and see how you would have handled this type of situation. In some of those situations, now that I'm older and not doing that anymore, I probably could have handled differently. But when you are new at it, you do the best you can.
Amazing. And it's not every engineer, manager that writes books like you do. What prompted you to write them?
Oh, I always wanted to be a writer. When I had the opportunity to return to school and I had to ponder what it was I wanted to do, there were 2 paths. I was going to go down the path of writing, or I was going to go down the path of engineering. My family is very lucky. We seem to have a math and science gene. We can't make a pot or design anything, but we sure can do math, science, aerospace, engineering, philosophy, all the types of things we can do well. Anything that's science related. But I also was a pretty good writer from the start. I ended up taking English, advanced English, and college English while I was in high school. They had a contest where one of the teachers was reading out the articles from different people. I won that, and it became obvious that I could or had the potential to be a good writer. But when I went back to school and I took a look at the fact that I already had a family and I was behind, because I had not gone to school straight out of high school. I graduated when I was 16, and I didn't go back to college till I was 21. So it became obvious I needed to support my family and make money. And engineering is a pathway that once you graduate, you do have the opportunity to make money immediately. Writing is a pathway that once you graduate, you do have the opportunity to bag groceries. So what I wanted to do was something that would allow me to make money immediately. So I chose the engineering path and decided that I would stay on that pathway until, everything was set. the key was once you start a career, it's really hard to leave it, especially if you're successful.
So what brought you to the point where you decided to pursue this writing dream?
It was my spouse actually said to me, we're doing well. You're planning on retiring in about 5 years. Why don't we figure out how we can retire now, and let's let you pursue writing. All my life, my kids have known that I had a wild time from 16 to 21, and they have teased me about it. My husband and my children have said, "Mom, you need to write down what happened in your life so that people recognize that you don't have to live your past, that you can overcome whatever has happened to you or how you have lived your life to do well." My kids would always say, "Mom, when are you going to write that book for about the fact that you ran off with a pimp when you were 17? And I says, "I'm going to write it." My husband finally said, "It's time, let's do it." And I early retired and said, "Let's give it a try."
So you have this 7-part series that tells your story, inspires people, educates them. But I understand that you're headed for the fiction world.
Yes, yes, I've gotten the memoir totally written. And one of the reasons I want to do fiction is I think you can reach more people. I loved telling my story and I enjoy helping people. But one of the things I want to do is I want to create a world, which is what you get to do when you write fiction. I'm going to create a world where there's magic and that the best teams are very diverse. They're from different worlds, different places, different dimensions to really illustrate the concepts that I believe in, which are that given a chance, people can do well. And that's going to be basically the core of the world that I'm going to create for my fiction.
It sounds wonderful. I can hardly wait. I love it. Toni, you are an inspiration, and I thank you so much for sharing all of this. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I do want to say there's a new platform that I'm writing on. It's called medium.com, and it's really neat. Young people love it. It has all types of diverse articles on it, and I'd like to invite people to go out to medium.com and look for Toni Crowe and read some of the articles, because I write about whatever I want, cats and people and politics and anything else. The other is that my website is www.tonicrowewriter.com. And I've got some interesting things out there and some blogs. It's an easy way to buy my books. I invite anyone to contact me with questions that they may have. I answer every email that anyone sends me. I enjoy having readers. I think readers make a big difference, readers, supporters. Other than that, no, this has been very pleasurable. I thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, Toni, my pleasure. And audience, take a look at the Medium articles and Toni's website and her books. I think you will get a tremendous amount from them. And Toni, we'll have to have you back maybe later in the year to tell us what you've been up to. It seems like you go at a very rapid pace.
Well, thank you. I would love to come back. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you again, and audience, thank you, and we'll see you back at these podcasts very soon.